Hey guys, watch my new bike trick. Whoa!
Accidents happen. When they do, LaPorte Hospital can help you get on the road to recovery faster. With our 30 minutes or less ER service pledge, we will work to have you initially seen by a medical professional in 30 minutes or less. Less waiting, faster care. The 30 minutes or less ER service pledge at LaPorte Hospital. During a medical emergency, every minute matters. That's why, at LaPorte Hospital, you'll find less waiting where you need it most, in our emergency room. In fact, we will work to have you initially seen by a medical professional in 30 minutes or less. And because we're a full-service hospital, we can provide more care if you need it. Less waiting, faster care. The 30 minutes or less ER service pledge at LaPorte Hospital.
All right, welcome to another great edition of Younger Life Live. I'm Rick Federici.
And I'm Mary Anthony.
Well, I got to tell you, what a beautiful Monday, the day before the big election.
I know, yes, it's been incredible. I can't believe we're in November.
Yes, I know.
Knock on wood, I haven't turned my heat on.
You haven't turned the heat on yet?
I haven't. A couple days when it was really, really cold, I turned it on for about a 2 or 3 day span because in the morning we were getting up and it was pretty brisk.
Yeah.
And I said, well, I'm not going to be cold in my own house, but I turned it on and then it got so nice. I just turned it back off.
And opened the windows, by the way.
Well, it's been amazing. So we haven't needed to. I did bust out all the winter. I put an additional blanket on all the kids' beds. It's the winter blankets on all of ours. And so I did do that. Last week I washed Betty and reloaded everybody's beds with the winter blankets.
Did you get any help from your children on that one, young one?
Oh, well, my girls are all big enough. I say, you make your own bed.
Good.
I mean, I wash their beds.
Good.
And they say, you make your own bed. They're not babies, you know. They can do that. And my boys are not quite old enough to do so.
I love you. Your children are so well behaved. They got so much great respect for you and your husband. I love
nice,
you guys.
But a
You're
little
the cutest
fib.
little family.
Thanks. Well behaved, not so sure. Fun, a blast. Yes.
Now, Emmerich and Wyatt. Now, Emmerich is your son.
Emmerich is my
Wyatt
4-year-old.
is your little nephew.
Yep.
They
joined us one day last week.
They are
wonderful.
so cute.
It's just the way it worked out, and they were
good boys.
They were well behaved for their age. You know, I try to avoid that if at all possible. You know, and I came very armed. I came very prepared. They each had their own snacks, and I brought a couple like I Spy books, and then I brought a little portable DVD player with the movie, trying to keep them occupied. I said, "Boys, it's 1 hour. Give me 1 hour."
I was
and
so
it was
impressed.
fun.
You had them set with stuff.
Mary brought in grapes and cheese and just all this healthy stuff. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Well, and
Like,
they
it was
each had a
good.
couple cookies, but you know, they all had. I bring them in 2 separate things, so they each have their own, so there wouldn't be that argument
fighting.
on this one's snarfing all the cookies or this, you know.
Yep.
So I try to be prepared. It was funny. They're darling. They really are.
I bet they went for some of those grapes and cheese too, didn't they?
Do you know it's funny? Yeah, they were gone. I joked. My son is a little more. He is a tank, and my nephew he's like a stick. And so I joke. And
That's the name of their new band, Tank and Stick.
Yeah, I said, it's pretty obvious why. When the show was over, my son had eaten every crumb of all of his little container of snacks, and my nephew had eaten half of his grapes, only a couple of his cheese nips, and no cookies. And I was like, look, this shows it right here. This speaks volumes. It was fun. But, you know,
So
speaking
good,
of
though.
food,
Yes.
we are talking about food today. And you know, making right choices on snacks and
Yes.
stuff, and not just for diet reasons. We are starting the first of a 4-part series on diabetes education.
I'm really excited about this and stoked
it
from an
affects
educational
so
standpoint.
many people
Yeah.
and so many families. And I'm really excited to get some of this information out there. So, Patty, could you introduce yourself and tell us what you do?
Thank you both for having me here today. So my name's Patty Leonard, and I'm an outpatient diabetes coordinator with LaPorte Hospital. And we offer services on diabetes education, insulin pumps, continuous glucose meters, classes, one-to-one appointments. But our main goal is really to empower individuals that have diabetes to be able to manage that disease process themselves, because it is a chronic condition, and we want to make sure that they know how that changes during each phase in life, so to speak, during different stages. And we also have our registered dietitian, Stephanie Mann, and another diabetes educator, Clarice Largen of LaPorte Hospital. And Stephanie offers a registered dietitian, dietary, nutrition, and counseling for all sorts of things, not just diabetes, but end-stage renal disease, obesity, and other needs as well for people.
Wow.
This is really, really awesome because, getting through this 4-part series, we're going to be doing this now just to kind of recap over the next several Mondays and a Tuesday.
Yeah,
we're going to be doing this.
Through
I
the
just
end of
want to
the
explain that to the audience that may be listening to our radio partner, WIMS, WIMSradio.com. We also have our YouTube.com insight. And, for those folks that may be watching us or viewing us, under YouTube.com, you go Younger Life, and then there's a little space, and then live. And then you could type that in, and you could actually see this wonderful lady right here.
Yeah.
You guys look great today. This is great.
It is exciting. I love the series aspect because diabetes is such a humongous topic.
Absolutely
I
agree.
mean, it's overwhelming to really try to Google anything about diabetes and look it up, or even if you think about your own experiences with anyone in your own families, there's so many different sides to diabetes. And, what is it? How does it happen? Can we avoid it? And what happens when you get it? And what do these medicines mean? There are so many different options now. You're always seeing new commercials on, diabetes and stuff. And I mean, it is definitely overwhelming. So I love that you're able to take the time out of your busy schedule to join us for a few different dates here to kind of get into it.
Too, Mary, too, dissecting it. And I was even saying as we were kind of leading into it when we were in the green room, just chatting about it in general, here's somebody like myself who's been surrounded by it all my life, but I have questions and I want to be educated. So I feel that it's great for folks out there, not only for ourselves, but for our loved ones and for family members and stuff like that. I'm curious just a little bit about yourself, if you wouldn't mind.
Please.
Obviously, you've been doing it. There's a passion for it. Can you chat a little bit about yourself and your background?
Sure. Well, I started at LaPorte Hospital back when I was 23 and in college. And actually, I was a social worker for many years before. Worked on a behavioral stress center at that time. And it's been 10 years ago, I went back into school for nursing. And I was on the floor doing med-surg nursing for about 5 years. And then outpatient diabetes these last 5 years. So it's been... diabetes has been a passion of mine and runs in our family, and I'm familiar with both type 1 and type 2 within our family area. And so it's really important to know that. But I have to say the passion really came from me working in the field even more so, because you would meet with people, you talk with them, they are lovingly and allow you into them, giving them their personal information and sharing some of their most personal information to be able to make changes in their lives. And then you see the success and the empowerment that they have and the confidence, because they come into diabetes and literally we ask in some of our classes, do they know what they have, type 1 or type 2? And they're not certain. So this whole road and journey that I've been on has always kind of been focused on healthcare, but really it's the people behind the healthcare and it's that one-on-one individual that I really crave and love. So we have wonderful stories and testimonials of people that come back, and that's
Maybe that could be part
So
5.
I love it. Yeah.
Part 5.
Well, I think that it's fantastic. I do feel like it is a movement in this sense. It's been building up for many, many years, but I mean, I think more and more people over the years are wanting more information, and not just having a doctor diagnose you and then say take these medicines, but we are always wanting to know why and what it does and what are the options. And so I think it's genius to have these diabetes education classes at the hospital too, and set up one-on-one with patients. They may not even know and understand what diabetes does to the body when it is such an enormous topic and a very big deal. It isn't just I got to watch my sugar. It's so much more than that. And I think that that's genius that they do that and that you do that and share that with people.
Well, thanks. We're very fortunate to have a great team at LaPorte Hospital, quite honestly. And the timing is perfect because November is National Diabetes Awareness Month, so we wanted to really bring it to everyone's attention. And we know that to reduce complications of long-term problems with diabetes, it's really an understanding the disease process. So they have to understand, how does one even get diagnosed or even just screened to make sure they don't have it? What is pre-diabetes and what is that step before diabetes? And pre-diabetes has no symptoms. And do I even need to worry about that? And well, what does that mean exactly? Well, a person does have a lot of opportunity to modify some of the risk factors for diabetes. Some you can't. For both type 1 and type 2, you may not, you can't alter your age, which puts us at risk the older that we get. We can't alter our race, and Native Americans and Alaskans are the highest percentage. But beyond that, it's non-Hispanic African Americans at our high rate, and then Latino families, or Latino backgrounds. And we have to know too that the correlation of why somebody's race plays a role in it is because some races have a higher chance or likelihood of having high blood pressure. And you have to think about it. When your blood's going through your body and the more force that heart is having to pump because that blood pressure's high, the more damage it can cause to other organs in the body. So we really talk about knowing what your disease process is, knowing do you have type 1 or type 2, and what are the steps that you can manage. You may not be able to manage, change some of the risk factors, but the ones that you can change, physical activity, your weight, the ability to be able to modify or alter a little bit of your dietary lifestyle. It's usually not these huge changes that we see. It's really making small changes in your everyday life that really have the big impacts of success. And it really is one that's life-sustaining instead of doing this particular diet for so long and it works really well, but you can't fit into your lifestyle. And then
I think I've tried all of those.
Certainly.
You're not some level. I think I've said, I can do this for a month, and that's it.
Yeah, you're not alone.
On a serious level here, you've got parents right in this room. You've got people that are professionals that are working 7 days a week, have crazy lifestyles. The Younger Life motto here is to live, stay younger, longer, all that good stuff. Try to eat better, do it in increments. We truly, when we signed on for this together as hosts, that was our goal, was to try different things. And let's be honest here, what I was able to do in my 20s, now as I edge up on 50, I never thought I'd have to worry about my weight. Now that's what I worry about, and what I intake in my body and the different things. So this has been a journey for both of us. And we so thank the LaPorte Hospital. We are learning, and we joke about it, but we mean it too, for ourselves and our families.
That's what I think, that there is that thirst for that knowledge of, and saying, I'm willing to try anything healthy. Why can't I make a change? Try it for a couple weeks and see how things go. And we've been surprised by a lot of the things that we've tried. We've had chefs on. We are not vegan in our household, but we have tried many vegan style foods and been pleasantly surprised and taken these ideas home too, which has been really nice.
Right.
So Patty, if you wouldn't mind, can we start with what diabetes actually is?
Excellent.
And
Certainly.
the difference in the different types, because I feel like that is very complicated. And just talking with you 5 minutes before the show, I quickly realized how quick the terminology even changes. I had cousins with diabetes, but as a young child, I had a younger cousin diagnosed very young with juvenile diabetes. And then I was shocked at a ball game of one of my kids to find out that an adult father in his early 40s was diagnosed with, quote, juvenile diabetes. And I thought that was strange. And so just in our talking for 5 minutes, realized how far things have come. So could you start with telling us what diabetes is?
Absolutely.
What it means.
Right. So diabetes is a disease, and it interrupts your body's ability to metabolize some of your main nutrients that come into your foods, or that you get from food. So protein, fats, and carbohydrates. How well our body uses food and energy is interrupted, so to speak, with diabetes. So there's type 1 and type 2. And type 1 is what we refer to as an autoimmune disease. And autoimmune, it sounds like a huge word, but it really means something that's impacting your own body by itself. So it's something that may have affected the pancreas, which actually makes insulin. So when your body's ability to make insulin, which is responsible for helping to lower our blood sugars, is affected, our blood sugars can run high. So in type 1 diabetes, it could be a child who was exposed to a virus. They could have had a bacterial infection. Maybe they had a heart infection, a heart bacterial infection that ended up settling and damaging part of the insulin-producing part of their pancreas. It could have been household poisons or toxins that somebody may have ingested. It could be an adult person that I know that had their gallstones and it blocked the pancreatic duct because the pancreas and gallbladder are close together and affected the pancreas's ability to make insulin. So there are a number of different things, and growing up we used to call it juvenile diabetes, and many people know it by that term now. But it is type 1 diabetes, and they changed it because we all associate, or many of us associate, type 1 diabetes just being in children. But type 1 diabetes really can come on at any stage, and we are seeing now where it's actually coming on later in life. So it's not uncommon sometimes to see somebody in their 30s or 40s even coming up with type 1 diabetes or having type 1 diabetes. So a type 1 diabetic, it doesn't mean that their diabetes is worse or more difficult it can be a little bit more challenging at times because of the insulin, but it doesn't mean that they have a worse case of diabetes than a type 2. So a type 1 diabetes treatment has to be insulin. It has to actually replace that organ's insulin. And so that's a life-saving technique that's needed. And many times, insulin's been in, I don't know if it was in the 1920s when it was first discovered, excuse me if I'm wrong on the date, but when it first came about, it's nothing to where it is now. Even people that I know that took like the pork insulin and the non-synthetics back 30 years ago, that's changed substantially. So we can see that people even have longer life expectancies with type 1 than we ever did.
Wow.
I think the last research is like maybe 2 years difference.
Oh my.
Now you take a smoker and there's a lot more years difference, right?
Yes.
So as the data continues to come in, and we see that in our generation, the management of diabetes and the detection of diabetes making an impact in our society, hopefully we reduce those risk of complications, which we really already have started to see. Type 2 diabetes is different in the fact that it has a very strong family history. Type 1 has some family history, but only about 5 to 10%.
Really?
And it has a little bit to do with the age of the parents, quite honestly. Under 25 years of age having a child or over, but it's a much smaller percent than type 2. So type 2 diabetes, your pancreas still makes insulin, and gradually over time, it reduces the amount of insulin.
Okay.
So many times people have diabetes type 2 for 5 to 10 years without any signs or symptoms. I liken it to, if you put on 1 pound a year, the first few years you may not notice those 3 pounds. 10 years down the road and 20 years down the road, you definitely notice it, right?
One pound a year
Raising
though
my
would be
hand on
really
this one.
nice. Not
Crazy.
I know. As I talked to high schoolers last week, and I was like, really, it will happen. You won't be
Yes.
able to have it.
yeah,
People for years
you
said to
can't
me,
eat your own entire pizza
from a guy
Yes.
who wrestled 89 pounds
Yeah,
Right?
in
right?
high school.
awesome.
Yes.
Crazy.
Sure.
Go ahead, please.
But so type 2 diabetes, while it has a strong family history, we do notice that there are significant impacts in treatment besides insulin, of course. So insulin usually comes later in a type 2 diabetic's treatment course, if at all, I should say. And sometimes it's temporary and sometimes not. But type 2, we take a look at really the impact of weight loss if they're overweight. We take a look at the impact of nutrition or dietary lifestyle. We talk about the amount of carbohydrates, which just really isn't sugar. It has other components to carbohydrates, starches and grains and beans and starchy vegetables and natural sugars found in fruit and milk and dairy. And then we take a look at diet and then exercise. So when we have a more sedentary behavior and we move more often, it actually makes our body use the insulin better.
really.
So type 2 diabetics come down to, well, let me say this. Diabetes comes down to really 2 things. Either your body is not making enough insulin or your body is not using it effectively. If I was going to put in simple terms, that's about the easiest way. Diabetes type 1 and type 2 comes down to either 1, your body's not making enough insulin, or it's not using it effectively, I should say, at the right time. So in a type 1 diabetic, they're not making the right amount of insulin. They have to have insulin. Type 2 diabetic, they can be still making the right amount of insulin, but their body's not using it effectively. So how do we get a type 2 diabetic to use that insulin effectively? First, we say move. I don't care if you're in a wheelchair. I don't care if you're using stretchy bands.
Yeah.
If you're doing some sit-exercises with your arms, but movement is huge. And guidelines through American Diabetes just came out this month on a revision on exercise. So they say, listen, if you're like in a desk position or you're sedentary, you really want to get up every 3 hours and move. You want to get up and just move for a little bit, even if it's for a few minutes. A couple stretches, push-ups against the wall, some leg lifts, whatever you can do, get up and just walk. So we know that when a person increases their movement, their body uses insulin better, which in turn lowers their blood sugar and helps them to control it.
I'm curious why. I know I don't want to throw
yeah.
you off.
Sure,
I'm just
no.
curious why even basic, marching in place or a couple jumping jacks helps the body be more efficient in using that insulin. Is it just because the blood's pumping more? I mean, you're taking in more oxygen, but I can't see that 3 minutes of
Sure.
exercise really.
What can that really do,
that's
right?
amazing
Yes,
to me.
Exactly.
That's amazing to me.
No, right. So without getting too sciencey
Right.
about it, your muscle cells in your body, actually insulin goes into the muscle cells.
Okay.
So imagine insulin is like a key that comes out of your pancreas. And insulin's going to go ahead and open up the muscle cells. Because our cells are very protective. They don't just
Right.
let anything
Right.
come into
That's
our
it.
cells.
Right.
They're going to protect our body. So your cells are protected. And they have these little locks on the outside of your cells. And your insulin's the key that can unlock that muscle cell. And the only thing that can get sugar, which is fuel for our body, into that muscle cell is that insulin key. So your insulin key has to go into the cell and unlock the muscle cell, and then sugar follows it automatically.
Yeah.
Sugar can't get ahead of insulin. Sugar can't jump into that cell and say, I'm here, let's dance because
Let's
I've
party.
got energy now, right? So once that insulin gets into that muscle cell, sugar follows, and then it converts into energy or fuel.
Yeah.
So we know a diabetic can have high blood sugars. And just because you see the commercial for Snickers on TV and it says, hey, if you eat this, you'll have all the energy in the world.
Yeah.
Right? It's just going to put more sugar in the bloodstream. So you can have a lot of sugar in your bloodstream, but if your body's not working effectively, meaning the insulin from your pancreas isn't getting into the muscle cell to unlock it, sugar cannot get in and turn into energy or fuel for your body. So what happens is for a type 2 diabetic or type 1, the signs and symptoms of a high blood sugar, because the blood sugars keep stacking up in the body.
that makes
right?
sense.
That term is called insulin resistance. So that's where your muscle cells are just resistant to allowing the insulin to come in. If the insulin can't come in, it goes back up in the bloodstream and your sugar keeps getting higher and higher. So when insulin does get in and sugar gets in, it reduces your blood sugar. So imagine when you control the amount of carbohydrates that turn into sugars in our bloodstream, we're controlling the amount of sugar we're putting into our bloodstream. Our body is hopefully going to utilize when we just get up and move. So if I'm not sitting at my desk and I get up and I move, our large muscles are wearing our legs and our
Yep.
fanny, even in our tummy, holding up this belly fat, right? So when we are using these muscles, these big muscles, they respond very quickly. Your muscles go, I need some energy. Patty, if you're going to go continue to take that 20-minute walk on a lunch break, you better give me some fuel, and it's going to pull it from my bloodstream from sugar.
Yeah.
So exercise helps the body to use insulin better, and it also helps to reduce the amount of blood sugars, and it helps your whole organs and body because you are now circulating that blood with a much better blood sugar as well.
That makes
too.
perfect
Can
sense.
I want to ask
honestly.
you a real quick question because I know that you are probably going to ask about risk factors and stuff
Oh,
like
absolutely.
that. But I want to ask this question because, I go and religiously see my doc. In fact, I was just there to check on freckles because cancer runs in the family, check on my blood pressure because I have high blood pressure, just a slight one. But when we're talking about this particular diabetes, which we've got this 4-part series going, brought to you by the LaPorte Hospital. This is series part 1. How do they can't really do a test to figure that out? Because you said sometimes on a type 1 and a type 2. Can you kind of explain that a little bit? I don't want to go off the path, but I would love that answer because I would be the first guy to say I want to do that test.
Right.
Because I want to know.
Is it a routine thing?
Right.
Absolutely.
If you don't mind? 'Cause you're
No,
the pro on this
no,
one.
absolutely. So in getting diagnosed for diabetes, there's a couple of ways you can do it. One is a blood sugar test called an A1C.
Oh, please. Perfect.
Okay.
Explain that. I feel like that's definitely a very confusing thing for some.
Sure. So an A1C gives you and the doctor an overall look at your blood sugar over the last 3 months.
Really?
When I went into nursing school, that confused the heck out of me. How can they tell what my blood
Yeah.
sugar's been over the last 3 months, right?
Yes.
But our red blood cells, they last about 2 to 3 months. So the whole time, imagine you've got your blood filled with these red blood cells going around in your body 2 to 3 months. Just imagine it kind of picking up the sugar. So when they do a blood sample, either a blood draw, but you know what? Some doctors' offices, and most do, have a little test that they can do, an A1C blood sugar test, just like a finger stick.
The little pin, the prick one, right? The
Yes,
little-
just like a little glucometer. It's a
Right.
special
Do you know
one.
what a baby I am? I'd rather go take it from the arm.
Yeah.
You know, it's just the anticipation of the
I think a
finger
lot of us are
stick.
like
And you're
that,
like,
though. Yeah.
but it's very quick. It is,
Yes.
you know.
Oh, if you had,
so.
honest to goodness, you would be surprised the number of people that come in with the same belief. Honest to goodness,
Yeah,
you'd
think,
be
"Oh,
surprised.
you know, yeah, how cute.
Yes.
So that a little sample, whether it be a finger
Right.
stick or an actual blood draw,
Sure.
in a general blood panel, if your doctor's doing that anyway.
And then
If
what are they
you-
looking for? Like,
Sure. So there are numbers that come out of this. So say, for example, I go to my doctor and I say, I have a history of type 2 diabetes in my family, and I'd like to make sure that I'm getting screened. They will go ahead and do perhaps an A1C blood sugar test. And if it comes, it'll come back with a percentage number. It might say like 5.2%. And you go 5.2%. Does that mean?
Yeah.
Well, those percentage numbers, they equal a regular blood sugar number. Okay? And it's an average. So if I go in, I know that anywhere between from 5.6% and less, my blood sugar would be non-diabetic.
That's normal.
That's normal. If I'm at 5.7 to 6.4% in my A1C, that means I'm pre-diabetic and I'm at
Whoa.
risk for having diabetes. That means now is the time to really try to see, do I have weight to lose? Yes. Can I exercise more? Yes. Could I control my carbs so that they're more evenly spread
Together,
throughout
everybody.
the day? Yes,
Yes.
right? So when I take control of some of those, right, I know that my risks can be reduced.
Okay.
Now, if I go in and my A1C is 6.5%, that means my average blood sugar is 140. Or it could go be higher, 6.5% or higher, but 6.5% is the determining mark that says you have diabetes at this time.
Really?
Now, it's really important because even though I don't have diabetes, I've had a kidney transplant. The medications I put that I take predispose me for that.
Really?
So this is why it's so important to go to your primary care provider, your doctor or nurse practitioner, because they really have a good understanding of you, and they will ask multiple questions and make sure that they have an understanding of yourself. But yes, so an A1C is a great way to be able to see it. And there are even some store kits that you can buy at the Walmarts and CVS, any local
Yeah.
drugstore area, but that you can actually buy, and it'll give you a great idea of what your A1C is. The other one is if you're just going to your doctor once a year, they are doing what's called just a fasting blood sugar. So
Yeah.
say you go to your doctor, you don't think anything about diabetes, and you've been going to the same doctor for 10 years, and now he goes, your blood sugars are getting a little bit elevated. You're kind of borderline, or which is pre-diabetic, quite honestly. That should be like a red flag that goes off. Now, right now, insurance doesn't cover pre-diabetes, so where are docs going to send them, right? We do have free pre-diabetes classes at
Really?
LaPorte Hospital, and I wish I could say more people took advantage of them because it's
Yeah.
a great learning point. It's 1 hour. Just come and get some information and share it.
And this is before you, actually have to have serious treatment. I mean, that's brilliant. And if you do that, if somebody were to take the class, kind of make some of these changes, type 2, I mean, you can not get it, right? I mean, you can
Yeah, you
protect
could-
yourself against not
Or
getting it. Is
control
that
it
right?
for
Yeah.
lack of better, right?
You may be able to prevent or delay type 2 diabetes. Boy, wouldn't I love to know the exact answer to that, right? Because if a person's pre-diabetic, there are some that may not go on and develop type 2.
Right.
But here's the thing, it depends on the risk factors, family history. Are they overweight or not, right? Are they a sedentary lifestyle? So if I have somebody that comes in and they're 30 years of age, they're fit, they're active, I look at their dietary lifestyle, maybe they don't know their family history. A lot of times people didn't share, grandmas and grandpas didn't share all that information, and they might have just done the best they could at that
Yeah.
point in time.
Yeah.
So you can sometimes have an opportunity to try and prevent that. But it's like anything else. I say, even though I have a kidney transplant, I can't close my eyes and say I don't have to worry about anything. I still have to monitor that. And diabetes is the same way. Even if you're pre-diabetic and you go back to a normal number, you still want to be able to watch that.
How often should that be checked?
Usually with your family doctor once a year.
Okay.
And if a person is diagnosed with diabetes and they start treatment, that A1C, we say, know as well as you know your birth date. Know it as well as you know your weight. Most people can tell me their weight. I don't make them, but most people know their weight within a couple pounds. I say, know your A1C that well, because that tells you how well is my diabetes being controlled.
Yeah.
So if I went to a doctor and he goes, Patty, or he or she says, Patty, you have diabetes at this time. Here's your A1C. And I know that through American Diabetes Association, which is a program we follow and we're accredited at LaPorte Hospital. I know that that if we take a look at that, they would say, okay, let's try the first 3 months through diet and exercise and see what that does. Does that apply to everybody? No. If I have someone coming in that's not been diagnosed and hasn't been to the doctor and their A1C is so high that their risk of a stroke or heart attack, which most diabetics do die from, is not being well controlled, that doctor's going to put them on some medication, he or she, and they're going to get that managed, help them to manage it, I should say, and then they can always reduce and take back the medication.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's nice. It's pretty standard for type 2 then to go ahead and say, as long as it's just a slightly elevated, to attempt first without medication?
That's something they should always talk with their
think that's
doctor, because you
nice.
really have to have an assessment of that individual. I wish there was just a simple yes or no, but you really have to have an assessment done.
So individual,
Yeah.
right?
This is absolutely wonderful. Let's take a quick time
Yeah.
out. We'll be back literally in a short minute or so.
I have some more questions about
this is
risk factors
awesome.
when we come
Thank
back.
you so much.
so-
We
Oh,
so
you're welcome.
appreciate your intelligence, your the knowledge.
I
on it
love
is
that
so
you're able
great.
to make it so relatable.
And
I think
by
that's
the way,
important.
you would be such a great person for a children's series of books, because the way you explain the key, I thought to myself, this is the first thing that popped in my head. You explain it so great.
Well, even just the talks at
Yeah.
schools, I think
I
that's
think you're
awesome.
wonderful.
Even not
Well,
just
thank
high
you. I
school,
appreciate that, but-
it's nice to have children understand it too,
Mm-hmm.
and understand why maybe there's some of their classmates do get insulin shots or have to go down to the nurse for blood sugar checks and stuff. So when we come back, I'm going to ask a few more questions about risk factors.
You got it. Younger Life Live returns in a minute or so. Sanders, our executive producer, Rick Federici, and of course, Mary Anthony. Part 1 of a 4-part series here with Younger Life Live and the LaPorte Hospital.
Hey guys, watch my new bike trick. Whoa!
Accidents happen. When they do, LaPorte Hospital can help you get on the road to recovery faster. With our 30 minutes or less ER service pledge, we will work to have you initially seen by a medical professional in 30 minutes or less. Less waiting, faster care. The 30 minutes or less ER service pledge at LaPorte Hospital. During a medical emergency, every minute matters. That's why, at LaPorte Hospital, you'll find less waiting where you need it most, in our emergency room. In fact, we will work to have you initially seen by a medical professional in 30 minutes or less. And because we're a full-service hospital, we can provide more care if you need it. Less waiting, faster care. The 30 minutes or less ER service pledge at LaPorte Hospital.
We're back with Younger Life Live. I'm Rick Federici. So this is part 1 of a 4-part series. This is awesome. If you're just joining us, great information here on Younger Life Live.
Right. Thank you, Patty, so much for joining us. While we were talking about the A1C, can you tell us what the normal blood sugar range is?
Sure. And I want to point out that's a great way, because although you can use an A1C to monitor blood sugars, and so can the physician as well, they're going to look at that maybe every 3 to 6 months, depending on where they are in the treatment. But the client, they need to be able to look at it on a daily basis and have an idea, or perhaps every other day, depending on what type of treatment. So let's say, for instance, I'm concerned about, let's say my husband, and I decide I'm going to start checking his blood sugars in the morning.
Yeah.
I could do a fasting blood sugar to see, does that fasting blood sugar fall in a range or not?
What is that? What you just said? Fasting
Thank
blood
you very
sugar.
much. A fasting blood sugar is when you take a blood sugar like a finger prick and you've had nothing to eat or drink for at least 8 hours. And I say, if you had water, that's
Sure.
fine. Okay, so nothing to affect your blood sugars. So if a diabetic wakes up in the morning and they're wanting to see, their range where they would like to be is around 80 to 130.
Okay,
So
that's
that would be a
considered
normal range, yes, for a diabetic. So if we said before a meal, it would be 80 to 130 as well. If we said, what about 2 hours after a meal? Now, if you're a type 2 diabetic, normally we'd go for 140 or less. And American Diabetes Association, they will say 180 or less for type 2 diabetes or for diabetes. But they're also looking, in my opinion, at the type 1 diabetic.
Yeah.
So if I have a type 1 diabetic that's taking insulin and 2 hours later, their blood sugar still being lowered by insulin in their body, I'll have a type 1 diabetic be like 180 or less.
Okay.
2 hours after a meal. A type 2 diabetic, not on any insulin, we're going to shoot for 140 or less 2 hours after a meal.
Okay. What about a non-diabetic person? What's a blood,
So
normal
like a
blood
normal
sugar
range, right? So a normal range for a non-diabetic person, fasting in the morning
Yeah.
with nothing to eat or drink, 60 to 99.
Really?
Yes.
That low?
Yes. Pre-diabetic, 100 to 125.
Okay.
I would love to try this on the Air Live.
Isn't that it's fascinating?
I really would, because I've had all kinds of stuff done as you were chatting
Uh-huh.
about, but I just for curious.
All right, I
don't
have
know
to
if
drop
that's-
you off
Well,
the
well,
meter.
No,
I'll
there-
drop you off
or
the meter.
next time you come,
Yeah.
maybe we it wouldn't be fasting because you.
Oh,
I mean, you're up at like 3 in the morning or earlier.
140.
But here's the good news. So even when we do screenings, people think that, I just had something to eat or drink. No, and I'm like, this is the best time when you really want to check, because now you've challenged your body.
Yeah.
You've given your body some fuel, and you're going, how well, body, can you handle this fuel that I've put into my
So
my
let's
body?
say I had orange juice, eggs, and a bowl of cereal.
Right, and I test your blood sugar 2 hours or later. I'm looking for 140 or less, even normal.
So maybe next
I'm up for
time,
the challenge.
you get a little finger prick and see how that
I'm all
goes.
about
Now,
it.
that's 2 hours after a meal. But let's just say I do a random one.
Yeah.
And when we would do different screenings and someone comes up and they're like, Patty, I just had a hamburger, fries, and a pop. I'm like, okay, I can still check it. Because now we
Really?
have a random. And if they're less than 200 and no symptoms, they may not have they don't have diabetes.
Is that an
Pretty good.
instant when you find out the information? Is that an instant? You're finding
yeah.
it out, like, so you do it and you're like,
Yes.
okay, you're at blah.
Right. So that's a screening, right?
Yeah.
You guys, that's not the same as being diagnosed.
Right.
Okay.
But it's good, right? Because it gives you something to say, pay attention to, right? And have you been checked out? Okay. If they go, yeah, usually I'm not, but my doctor put me on some steroids for this asthma and stuff, and my blood sugars are really high. And I'd go, do you do that normally all the time? Maybe they need to consider a little medicine during that time period when you take it.
Yeah.
Or if they go, no, my blood sugar's like this. And I'm like, do you find symptoms of high blood sugar, increased thirst, increased urination? We call it drink and pee. Drink and
Perfect.
pee,
I
drink and pee,
wanted to
drink
ask
and
that
pee.
when you just mentioned symptoms.
Sure.
Let us know. So
Sure.
increased thirst
Increased thirst.
is just a typical symptom that anyone with higher blood sugar, diabetic, not diabetic, would have, right?
Usually a diabetic, absolutely. And it gets to the point where it's insatiable. You just can't
Really?
get enough. Yes.
How
That's
about
when
how
it
about
gets
going to the
doctor.
bathroom?
Yeah.
Yes, because if you're drinking, your
Men and
bladder-
women?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, when we look at later on in life, too, sometimes if they're getting up in the middle of the night, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're diabetic. There are
Certainly.
other factors and issues that happen along the line, right?
yeah, that's
Okay.
just normal.
Right.
But go
So
ahead
that's
and
why good
expand on that
assessment.
one a little bit.
Okay.
But for a person that's never been diabetic
Yes.
and doesn't really feel like they're having these symptoms,
Mm-hmm.
that would be a good indicator to say, hey, this isn't normal for me to be going this often or
Certainly.
to be this thirsty.
Right, right.
That you just can't
Yeah.
stand it.
And so with a diabetes, increased thirst, increased urination, sometimes increased hunger, weight changes, blurred vision is another big one.
Really?
Yes, and it can come and go sometimes, and that's because of some of the fluid shifts too in the eyes that happens with the insulin. So many times these symptoms don't happen until they've had it for quite some time. So it builds up gradually and slowly. Now pre-diabetic will have no symptoms at all.
Wow.
So you could be pre-diabetic for quite some period of time.
And
See,
is
that's-
there damage?
that's scary.
It is scary because
That's
is there
scary.
damage still being done to the body even though you haven't had any symptoms yet then?
Certainly. I mean, when it's pre-diabetic, anytime you're going on for increased sugars in the blood, your body's just not as effective at using,
Right.
but benefiting you. But is there permanent damage? It just depends on length and time and conditions.
Certainly.
Yeah. But truthfully, when you're pre-diabetic, you really have the ability to avoid the long-term complications if you turn it around quick enough.
Can we ask about some other conditions and see if they're related at all,
Sure.
or increase your risk of possibly being diagnosed with diabetes later? If you have conditions like high cholesterol on a regular basis, or hypertension.
Sure.
I'm also concerned about the weight side of things.
Well, we know
Right.
weight is an issue, correct? I mean,
Certainly.
you said that weight can be an issue, but what about the other two? I mean, sometimes those all go together. I
Right.
hate to say that, but
Yes.
sometimes they do.
No.
Right.
So absolutely. So there's a couple of things. There's like a metabolic syndrome. You know, we talked about diabetes having to do with our metabolism and how well our body works. And it's increased blood sugars, which could just be pre-diabetes. Doesn't have to be diabetes. It could be increased cholesterol levels. So where your LDL cholesterol level
Yeah.
is higher than 100. It could be your HDLs, your healthy ones. Your L's are your lousy ones. Your healthy ones are your healthy ones, are too low and not good enough for you. That can affect too. So when you have elevated sugars, elevated fats, and then elevated blood pressure, meaning 140/90 and higher, that puts you at risk for diabetes.
Okay.
So how does blood pressure, hypertension, high blood pressure play into this? This is really important. When you have diabetes, your blood has more clotting factors in it, which means
Okay.
you can clot more easily. So if a person has a stroke to the brain, it's usually a blood clot going to the brain 90% of the time. If they have a heart attack, very often it's a clot that goes to the heart. So diabetics typically will check with their doctors, and their doctors might order a small dose, like an 81 milligram baby aspirin, to reduce that risk. Again, they always have to check with their physician because they may be taking other medicine that
We say that all
not,
the time.
right?
Check with your doctor.
Right.
And we are not doctors.
Right,
We certainly are not.
Right. So, managing your blood pressure, your cholesterol level, your weight, and your fats is really very important. So, the hypertension or high blood pressure, I know I spoke just briefly on this, but when your blood pressure inside all your vessels are elevated, that means your heart is pumping
Right.
much harder. And you have to imagine that blood that's being pumped from your heart through all your vessels is like the hose that's been kinked. You've got water going to the hose, and you hold it over, and then you let it out to squirt your
Yep,
kids or
absolutely.
your friends, right? And it comes gushing out, and it has a lot of pressure on it. That's like the pressure that's on our vessels that can cause wear and tear.
Right.
And inside our vessels over time, we build up plaque, and plaque also has to do with the cholesterol levels in our body and fats. So we want to make sure that that blood pressure isn't going so high and breaking off the little plaques inside us to cause a little clot. That causes a lot of damage down the road. So high blood pressure, high cholesterol, elevated fats, and elevated sugars are really critical in the management of diabetes.
That makes perfect sense.
Excellent
It does.
information, to the point where it's like the knowledge we are gaining from today's part one of
I
a
know.
4-part series is absolutely phenomenal. This would be one of those where, at the end of the year when we do our rewinds for the last couple
Yeah,
of
we
weeks,
do the year
this
in
would
review.
this would be phenomenal
This
because
is-
I would love just this one alone.
I know.
can imagine what the other 3 are going to be like. And then part 5 is, Ricky going under the little pinprick.
I am curious about the for someone whose body seems to function pretty efficiently when it comes to insulin. If they are consistently overloading themselves with sugar, like candy, we just had Halloween, so
Sure.
Of course we have candy in the house.
Lots.
And I'm constantly saying, okay, of course the kids want it, and you say
Sure.
after we have dinner, if you want a piece or two, go ahead. But
Certainly.
what happens? Are they increasing their risk of their body's efficiency? Being less efficient, their body's being less efficient, handling all that extra sugar, or if their body's working fine, there's no real need to be worried about it, other than just, sugar's not good for us, period. We know, but
No, and certainly it's all in moderation, right?
Right.
So if you don't have diabetes and you have kids, even if you're a diabetic, heck, 7 main holidays maybe out of the year, I don't care if that diabetic goes a little nutty on those
Really?
holidays, right?
That's
Yeah.
nice to know. I
It's-
think
it's
people
not
are
being
very
perfect.
extreme.
Nobody's going to be perfect. And let me just say first and foremost, sugar does not cause diabetes, okay?
Yes.
So if I have a type 1 child in front of me and they're going to a birthday party, do you think I'm going to say, you can't have that cupcake? Here's some vegetables and dip for you to have. No, heavens no.
You know what? But I bet you there are parents that think that way.
There's parents, there's healthcare providers.
Yes.
I mean, God bless. It takes an understanding, right? So it takes some education because 30 years ago was no sugar, no sugar, no sugar,
Right.
and our mindset is, we've seen people with very illness, very chronic and ill complications. And that's not to say that doesn't still happen, but it's understanding the management. This is where we empower people to know that they can manage it. Look at some of your professional race car drivers and football players and athletes that are diabetic. They expend a lot of energy. They match up their insulin for what their body needs.
Yeah.
Right? And as long as they're not gaining weight, right, it's okay. So it's okay for them to have sugar and to have desserts. A diabetic, if I'm diabetic, and they say, Patty, I know for me how many grams of carbs would work because I've done it before. So just for managing my weight best. And say I have so many grams of carbohydrates to have. And it comes around, I'm half Lebanese, so my mom and I, we make Easter cookies. And, oh, they are not low-cal, low-cal. And if I was diabetic, am I going to say, I'm not going to do that? Heavens, no.
Yeah.
I'm going to say, I'm going to have those 2 cookies with my mom. And if I have a nice salad or grilled chicken or fish with it, fine. But if I'm just going to have those 2 cookies and coffee, I'm going to test my blood sugar before.
Yes.
I'm going to eat those 2 cookies and coffee. I'm going to test 2 hours later.
I like that.
Yeah.
And if I'm
I like
140
that.
or less, then yes. Now, do I want to do that every day? No, 'cause
No.
it's not efficient for my body's
Certainly.
health. But it doesn't mean that you have to say, I have to live a perfect life.
Or
and
cut it
I
out
have to deny
altogether.
everything. Absolutely.
I like that everything in moderation.
I do too. I love that.
That's
And it's
what
a
we're all
great
about.
point. My little cousin that was diagnosed very young, we were all very young. So, when we would, my grandma, we would have lots of sleepovers. And she's kind of swapped her Schwann's ordering from regular ice cream and maybe ice cream bars to the sugar-free popsicles and stuff like that. So that's what we all had. And that's all she bought then. So there wasn't, my cousin feeling left out. But my aunt, her mother, is a nurse, still is a nurse. So that helped out a lot. I mean, tremendously, where my aunt would say, okay, it is a birthday or it is something, and
That's
we're going to
awesome.
have cake.
Yes.
Let's check your blood sugar and do
Sure.
this and adjust your insulin if we needed to.
Absolutely.
Whatever had
Right.
to happen. But I don't feel like enough people know that. I
Right.
do think that people think, that's it, I never can have another piece
That's
of candy
exactly
in my
what people
life.
think, though.
They do.
But this
Yeah.
this 4-part series, this is the great knowledge that we're gaining from
And,
this.
right, and next Monday
Seriously.
we're really going to we're going to focus on, once you've been diagnosed, how to handle it, foods you can have, the options that are out there, and how you can kind of balance that. But I think it's so important to point that out, that it doesn't necessarily mean you're done with the sweets forever. As far as well-balanced diet, can you tell us why that is so important? It's important for all of us, we
No,
know,
sure,
but
sure.
certainly someone that may be pre-diabetic, why is it so vital to make sure
Right.
that they're doing well balanced? And early on today you hinted about spacing those carbs out, properly,
certainly.
like over the day. Can you kind of tell us why that's important and how to do that?
Absolutely. So imagine if you put all your fuel for your body, for all your day's worth of fuel that you needed in your body just at breakfast time. Mm-hmm. If your body can't make enough insulin, or if your body can't use that insulin effectively, like that insulin resistance we talked about,
Right.
and you have a lot of these foods that break down into sugars, you're not going to be able to get all that sugar that you need reduced down. It's not going to get into your muscle cells. So let me put it more simply in case there's listeners that have just tuned in. I should try and go back up on that. Basically, you want your fuel supply to be relatively steady. You want to be able to, at each meal or each time when you eat, just give your body what your body is able to handle. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is, if my body is my pancreas is making some insulin, and maybe I'm taking some medication to control part of that, even if I take in too many carbohydrates, my blood sugar can still be too high, and it can leave me feeling tired, without any energy, and it can make it difficult because even though I've taken in more carbohydrates, my body didn't need that much. So when you break it down to where you manage the amount of your fuel evenly throughout your day, it makes it much easier for your body to manage it, and it gives you better energy levels.
Yeah.
It's like if people on Thanksgiving, if they overdo it and they're ready for the couch then.
Right?
It's not all the tryptophan in the turkey, I'm telling you all right
Yeah,
now.
I like that.
It's so
There
true.
you go. Another one I like.
Yeah.
But that just is overloading sometimes with too much, and your body just taking a while to do that. And it takes a lot on our system, our blood, to even process everything. So
Yeah.
you want to be able to have an adequate amount of energy throughout your day without leaving your blood sugars elevated. It's probably the best results that you get out of it.
That's such a good point for all of our diet, regardless pre-diabetic, diabetic, not it's best if you could stick to that, find a way to make that work for you and stick to that. I think that's definitely ideal. Does it change the well-balanced part for someone that is pre-diabetic or diabetic? Does it change their requirements for vegetables and fruit, or the kinds of vegetables and fruit that they need to take in?
You brought up a great point. And usually not. Sometimes your fruits you have to take a look at if you have people in extremes, right?
Right.
I could just say, give me half a watermelon, I'd eat that for dinner and be a happy camper, right? But no, a diabetic really couldn't unless you really took a look at the amount of carbs. But for the most part, managing it is the key to be able to have some success with your diabetes. There was one other point I wanted to make, just in going back for one moment, because I don't want to.
please
We got about a
run out of
minute.
time.
Go for it.
Good.
You're
One
good.
point I want to say is, statistics came out that by the year 2050, 2050, 1 in 3 people would be pre-diabetic. And if there's one thing I really want to point out that I really want people to take home from today's message or throughout this month is have a candid talk with your doctor or nurse practitioner. Make sure you at least know where your fasting blood sugars in the morning. They do that once a year as part of your office visit, and ask them what's normal, what's pre-diabetic, what's diabetic, because I want that individual to know. I don't want you just to rely that it's always somebody that's going to catch that, and I want you to be able to know that because that's really important. And if you go, hey, if I reach 100 on my fasting blood sugar, I need to make sure my doctor's saying, hey, is this normal or not?
I think it's great.
Awesome. Part 1 of a 4-part series. Rick Federici, Mary Anthony, excellent so far. So
Yes,
Monday,
Patty, thank
in a
you.
nutshell, what do we do next Monday for
Next
this?
Monday, we're going to kind of focus on once you've been diagnosed with diabetes, how to handle it, what that means for your body, what the medicines mean. And Patty, could you give us a number to reach you at the
thank you very
hospital
much. Sure,
for
sure.
someone out there that might have heard some of these things and say, I really am interested. I really need to know some of this.
Absolutely. So my office number is 219-326-2478, and my cell number is 219-877-7216. So feel free to reach me on either.
On
Thank you,
behalf
Patty.
of us all at Younger Life Live, Gerard Media LLC, our radio partner WIMS, and thank you to the LaPorte Hospital, Sanders, our
Absolutely.
producer. I'm Rick Federici.
I'm Mary Anthony. Thank you, Patty,
Thank
so
you
much.
guys
It's
very much.
fantastic.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Awesome.
Thank you.
I look forward to these. I think these are going to be great information.
AM 1420, WIMS, Michigan City, a Gerard Media Company station.